Henderson. Well, Mr. Henderson is in the room now. Mr. Henderson, you need to unmute your line.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we have you.
Very good. Thank you.
The commissioners have had the chance to speak with you recently.
Yes.
So we may not have as many questions for you as the other applicants, but don't take any offense to that.
No, understood.
And I remember last time I asked you, do you have an opening statement? You said, no, not really. So I'm going to ask you again.
Not particularly, Dan. Not a lot has changed other than COVID-19 since the last time I interviewed with y'all back in February. But with that, other than the COVID-19 situation, not a lot has changed since I interviewed with you all last time.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to field some interviews and allow some more time for some of the other applicants where it's their first time and you haven't never had a chance to talk to them.
That's well appreciated. But Mr. Bear, why don't we start with you if you have any questions?
And Mr. Henderson, the last time, and I believe maybe all the times I've had the privilege of being on the panel where you were applying, they've been for circuit court positions.
Yes.
The county court position is obviously different in a number of important ways. Can you speak to why, well, whether you would, in a clean slate, prefer one or the other, and why you might, at least in some ways, be a better fit for this current open position in county?
Well, I would be honored to serve in either a county court capacity or a circuit court capacity. I know I have campaigned and applied for circuit court seats, primarily, because those have been available. But again, I'd be honored to serve in either capacity. I don't have a particular desire to over circuit over county. I would be happy to serve the public in either capacity. I obviously have a broad range of experience. County court typically deals with, misdemeanor crimes, some civil, landlord tenant, some minor issues like that. Now, some of the county court judges in our circuit have taken on 6-month assignments to handle circuit court matters, including injunctions, family law cases, which are dissolution of marriage, paternity cases, post-dissolution issues, post-paternity issues, contempt issues. And in the criminal side, the county court judges are handling early resolution, which is for low-level felonies and first-time offenders. I've done all of that, so I'd be very comfortable sitting in the capacity of a county court judge.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Snedeker.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I noticed in your application that you said that you would strive to manage your docket as a county judge efficiently. What did you have in mind when you said that in your application, and how would you do that?
Well, it would depend on what area of law that I was, presiding over. So, if it was criminal law, there are ways of streamlining it. There are ways of, absent the COVID-19 situation, assuming that that wasn't an issue right now, I would probably be a little bit more firmer on deadlines, not grant continuances as liberally, unless they're absolutely needed for due process reasons or witness reasons or things like that. If they have good cause for a continuance, then that's understandable. But on county court docket, these are misdemeanor crimes on the criminal side, and there's no reason that these things should drag out a year or so, unless there's something really extenuating. So moving the docket along, limiting the continuances, but fairly, and making sure both sides, the state and defense, are prepared. There's some other ways you can streamline certain court dates, like docket soundings. You can do paper dockets and ease the congestion in the courtroom. On the civil side, I think it'd be a little more challenging if you were sitting in the capacity of a circuit court judge handling family court matters. So, for example, one of our county court judges was handling family court matters, and the trials were getting set about a year out into 2021. Now, that may be because the docket is large, What I would probably do if I stepped into that capacity is take a look at the docket and see which cases I could possibly move up, deal with, especially now under COVID-19, where we have this opportunity to use video conferencing like we're using right now. I think there's an opportunity to address and resolve cases. What's going on right now with COVID-19, as you all know, is it's having a tremendous and detrimental impact on our justice system. And people can't get into court to get redress, get issues resolved. Now, I understand we can't do jury trials until the end of May or beginning of June. Most evidentiary hearings are suspended. But there's no reason why we can't do case management conferences and other hearings. People can still testify, be sworn in and testify. And just to get the docket, it would, to answer your question specifically, as a jurist or a judge, I would take a more proactive role in making sure the cases are moving rather than just coming in the morning, sitting on the bench and saying, okay, what do we got today? I think a judge that takes the time beforehand to look at their docket that's coming up the following week, taking a look at those cases on their off time, getting prepared for them, seeing which ones they can move, I think is the way to do it.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Pickett.
Hi, Mr. Henderson. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Pickett. Very good, thank you.
There is some suggestion through the chief judge that the county court position may continue the temporary family assignment that Judge Neighborhouse had.
Yes.
What could you bring to the table on the family side? I know obviously you have some significant experience doing criminal law, and that your firm does some family law. What experience do you have, and how could you hit the ground running on a family law docket if you were appointed?
Okay, that's a great question. Our firm does a tremendous amount of family law. It's probably in the neighborhood of 60% of what we do. My law partner does that exclusively. I do a tremendous amount of family law. I draft a lot of pleadings. I draft a lot of motions. I do go to court and argue these motions. So while I'm not a full-time practicing family law attorney, I do have nearly a decade of experience handling family law cases. I've done trials. I've done post-dissolution issues. I'm familiar with the child support guidelines. I'm familiar with the alimony. So, most divorces, if they're uncontested, they're not complicated. It gets complicated when you get into retirement accounts and children and marital assets. But it doesn't have to be complicated. The child support guidelines are cut and dried. They are what they are once you have the incomes. Alimony is a little trickier. But I think I could pretty much hit the ground running. It's not like I've never handled a family law case or litigated a family law case. Handled hundreds of them. So I would feel very comfortable stepping in the role of presiding over family court cases. No question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Fallon.
Good morning, Mr. Henderson. It's nice to see you again.
Good morning. Good to see you too.
Good morning. I'd like to ask you, I'm looking at your writing sample that you
Yes.
submitted. It looks like it's got family issues from 2015. Why did you select that particular selection? And if you could just tell us a little bit about it.
The main reason I selected that position is to show some diversity in the areas of law that I practice in. That particular case, obviously, was a family law case. Without boring you for 30 minutes about it, the gist of it was our client was taken advantage of, for lack of a better word. And she had been a doctor, became disabled, and met this gentleman, married this gentleman. And the facts are pretty egregious, so I won't go into that. But the gist of it was he was able to dupe her into getting all of her disability payments. And that prevented her from being able to live, essentially. So we took the case on, and we started working on trying to get rid of this agreement that was put in place that was unfair and unjust. So the writing sample I provided to you it's not perfect, but it spelled out, the reasons why the court can and should undo this egregious agreement that was put in place. We did actually prevail on that, and the judge did set that agreement aside, and she now has all of her benefits. She's doing very, very well. She is remarried to another man, and they spend the majority of their time down in Mexico surfing, ironically. In fact, they're stuck down there. We keep in contact because we actually became pretty good friends. And she's actually down in Mexico, actually stuck in Mexico right now. Guess it's not a bad place to be stuck, because her husband is a big surfer. He shapes surfboards and stuff. So I drafted that particular motion. My partner argued it in court, and we're just real happy for her. It was one of those great success stories. And it was the right thing. The judge made the right call in this case, but it required us to present a lot of evidence to support our position. And ultimately, the judge did see what was happening there.
Thank you. It's an interesting writing sample, and I was wondering about the result. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Delgado.
Good morning, Mr. Henderson.
Good morning.
You mentioned some of the current challenges with the delay in court proceedings due to COVID.
Yes.
With the anticipated backlog of cases, hearings, etc., what strategies would you employ as a county court judge to manage your caseload on the other side of this pandemic?
Well, if I may, if I was appointed, the seat would probably start fairly quickly, and if it's during the pandemic, I would try and get to some of these cases, by video conference, and see if we can't resolve some of these issues. Just to back up a little bit, if I may, what we've seen is, in our firm at least, is a huge spike in post-dissolution motions for contempt for time sharing issues. So a lot of parents don't want to turn the child over to the other parent because of COVID-19. We don't have an AO or administrative order of our county that specifically deals with that. Orange County does. Orange County says that the time sharing should stay in place and continue. But if I was to take the seat while the pandemic was still pending, I would do as much as I could to work with attorneys. There's ways to do this. Try to get some hearing done. People need to get in court. We've also seen a giant spike in injunction filings. And I've got several respondents that can't get into court until the end of May, the earliest right now. And that is very challenging for them. There's no reason these injunction hearings can't be done by video conference. There's ways to do that, ways to get evidence in that way. Post-pandemic, I guess we'd have to see where we are, because we don't really know when this is going to end. Hopefully it ends soon. But with that backlog, I know there's people that were set for hearings and whatnot in March and April that have been postponed. So I think first and foremost is to take those people, try and get their cases addressed quickly. There's always going to be emergency motions filed. And as a judge, you'd have to look at that emergency motion on a family case and decide whether or not it's a true emergency. And if it is, then you need to fit them in and get it heard. And if it has to be at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'll be there and I'll do it, as long as the attorneys and the parties are content doing it. But as a jurist, I see myself having to work long hours so we can get caught up. And I don't mind working after hours, and I don't mind working on the weekend to get these people justice and get our justice system running again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let me ask we're running a little bit behind in just a minute or two, but
yes,
let me ask Mr. Robinson or Mr. Dowdy or Mr. Valentine if they have any pressing questions for Mr. Henderson at this time.
I don't have any questions.
I also do not have any questions.
Mr. Dowdy?
No questions.
All right. Well, Mr. Henderson, it's nice to see you again.
You too. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good luck, Steve.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, I'm going to admit Mr. Hoodis.